Hi, I'm Joni Patry, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Well, today I want to talk about legendary communicator, radio show host, talk show host, Rush Limbaugh, because he just passed away February 17th. So I wanted to pay tribute to his life to see what his chart really tells us about who he was. Because he is really known for voicing his opinion, whether it is acceptable or not. He was considered a conservative in so many ways. And boy, did he speak his truth. Whether you agreed with him or not, he spoke his truth. Let's look at his chart. Let's see exactly what his chart reveals about his personality in his life. So putting up his chart right up here, we have Rush Limbaugh's chart, and what we see is his ascendant is in Capricorn. Capricorn is ruled by Saturn, and for the most part, most Capricorns will be known to be conservatives in their own right, but he was anything but boring. He was like amazing with what? The voice. And if you'll notice, the second house, which deals with the voice, is where he had some very powerful planets. Jupiter and Rahu. Jupiter magnifies things while Rahu magnifies that Jupiter all the more. So he had a big voice. A big way of expressing things. It couldn't have been bigger, really. And it was in Aquarius. Aquarius is the truth seeker. It is the one who will voice their opinion the loudest, unemotional, in many ways unaffected. But Aquarius actually rules with humanity. And whether you liked him or not, he cared about humanity. And I watched some people speak of him, which, to be honest with you, I didn't follow a lot of his stuff. And everyone commented about his kindness and generosity. This would be the big Jupiter in the second house with Rahu. Another thing, he amassed a great wealth in his life. I believe he was worth at least $550 million at the time of his death, give or take. That's what I surmised. But that is a lot of money. The second house is the house of wealth and money, and putting Jupiter there with Rahu represents his great capacity for wealth. Now, one of the things I always do when I first look at a chart is I look to the ruler of the chart, because whatever house it goes to will be a focus throughout life. And the ruler of his chart is Saturn. I consider the chart ruler the planet that rules the ascendant. And with Capricorn ascendant, Saturn rules his chart. And his Saturn goes to the 9th house. And remember, we use the old rulership, so Saturn also rules Aquarius. So the ruler of the second house of the truth, speaking his truth, Saturn rules the first and the second, goes to the 9th house. What is the 9th house all about? Finding the truth. It deals with law, the legal systems, and this is something that he was all about, speaking about the laws, the legal systems, how things were run, and changing them. He was a voice for what he believed in. And the 9th house deals with our beliefs, the law. And this is what he was all about, and speaking. And here's another thing. Whenever the ruler of the second goes to the 9th house, they speak the truth. The second house is speech. The 9th house is the truth. Maybe you don't agree with him, but it was his truth. He was not lying. He said it like he believed it. And that was his most strongest attribute and power. Now, I did notice that they said that he was practically deaf, so he had some major issues with hearing in his ears throughout life. And interesting that you would be somebody that speaks, but there's hearing problems. So the third house actually deals with communications as well. As the second house is our voice, the third house is more about writing. And of course, he has the moon there in Pisces. And Saturn opposes it. Saturn in the 9th house is opposing his moon in the 3rd house, which could attribute to his hearing loss and problems, but also gave him the discipline to express himself through the written word. Now, another thing that's interesting about him, now still talking about his hearing, his Venus is in the nakshatra in the 1st house. It's in Capricorn, but it's in the nakshatra called Shravana. And Shravana does deal with the hearing and listening. And I find it very interesting that he would have this nakshatra strong, but Venus sits right next to Mars, which is quite difficult next to Venus, will cause disruptions. As a matter of fact, I also see that Mars in the 1st house aspecting the 7th house, causing what we call, when Mars is in the 7th house, Kuja dosha. And Kuja dosha is, it disturbs marriage. Whenever Mars aspects the 7th house, either being in the 7th house or opposing the 7th house or aspecting the 7th house by Mars special aspects. But this is not good for marriage, and he was actually married 4 times. You can see that. And not only that, Venus being the wife, Mars sits right next to it. Another nakshatra I think is very relevant to talk about is the fact that his Jupiter is in the nakshatra called Shatabhishak. And Shatabhishak is known to be the 100 healers. And the reason why it is called the 100 healers is because many times it deals with very hard to cure diseases. Now, of course, he died of cancer, and that is a hard to cure disease. But this is quite, many people die of cancer and they're not going to have this nakshatra strong. But I think in his case, it dealt with his hearing loss, because this was a hard to cure disease that he dealt with throughout his life, and not to mention he also had cancer for quite a long bit of time and dealt with hard to cure diseases. And being in the 2nd house, this is even more difficult, as this is a Marika house. And Marika is a house that can deal with death as well. But moving on to talk more about his personality, I noticed that the Sun and Mercury sit in his 12th house. And I find that when planets are in the 12th house, it deals a lot with dealing with foreigners and foreign places, which I'm sure he did a lot of, and travel. But if you'll notice, Uranus actually opposes that Sun Mercury, making him very unconventional and rebellious, very rebellious. But Uranus sits in the 6th house, while the Sun Mercury sits in the 12th house. And the 6th house deals with enemies, while the 12th house deals with hidden enemies. And I think that Uranus aspecting the Sun and Mercury represent all the controversy and hidden agendas people had against him and fought with him. They didn't fight fairly. And come to think of it, at some point in his life, he became addicted to opiates for pain pills. And he lied about it. And the National Enquirer, hidden enemy, was the ones that exposed it all. Well, about a week later, he came out with the truth, which is admirable. He finally admitted it. When people tell the truth that are famous, whether they're presidents or movie stars, and they come out and say, yeah, I did it, I'm sorry. The public forgives. The public is very forgiving. They just don't like to be lied to. So that was actually to his advantage. And I think he brought a lot of people over to his side when they saw the corruption of these social media or publications, the media, and how it is down and dirty. He exposed them. It kind of turned to his favor, even though he had to overcome an addiction, which many times the nakshatra Shatabhishak deals with hard to cure diseases, which is actually addictions in many cases. So therefore, he had this issue and problem with addictions. Now, if you look from Chandra Lagna, I always turn the chart to make the moon the ascendant. You see another dimension of Rush, which I'm seeing the sun and Mercury in the 10th house from the moon, giving him his power and leadership. This was truly an amazing man that had such an exciting, eventful life. And people that have Mercury and the sun in the 10th house, trust me, they don't need to be working for other people. They need to own their own business because they know how to run things and they know what they're doing. But this does put Jupiter Rahu in the 12th house. And once again, there's something about secret agendas and enemies. And this can be losses, especially in the area of children. So I don't recall if he had children, but I'm sure he did with being married 4 times. But I'll tell you what, Jupiter Rahu is not good for your relationship or with having children. So I'll leave that. But the Mars-Venus goes to the 11th house. And the 11th house is the house that deals with groups and organizations and people and humanity. And this is what he was all about with his work and how he exposed things, spoke about things, but most of all tried to help humanity with these things. And the 11th house deals with that. Now Rahu and Ketu, in his birth chart, they go against the Rahu in this 2nd and Ketu in the 8th. Some of his issues and some of the things that he came here to learn through were money. And it has been known that Rush gave enormous amounts of money to help the betterment. He gave to the cancer organizations for healing. He did some amazing charitable work financially. And the fact that Ketu's in the 8th house means he gave. And Rahu, of course, in the 2nd house is the money he was able to acquire. But he was generous enough to give it away. And actually, Jupiter being in the 12th house from the moon always means great generosity, people who give to others. And that's basically the person and the life that he led. So with that, I hope you have a better understanding of astrology, how it works, and most of all, have a better understanding through his chart of Rush Limbaugh. So with that, I'd like to close. If you would like more information on me, receive my free newsletter with predictions, go to my website, galacticcenter.org, and don't forget to check out my spiritual jewelry line of malas and prayer beads. And if you would like to learn Vedic astrology, go to my university website. Become part of our community, the fastest growing university for astrology out there. Go to University of Vedic Astrology.com. Thank you.